Hello, Keith Myers here again. It's kind of windy today, so I'll try to speak up. Hopefully it doesn't drown out the audio. Decided to do a clip on posture and power. And one of the things that kind of inspired me to do this is, if you saw one of my previous clips, I talked about how the Yiji Kim Young Ma stance is more than just a training stance, it's also a fighting stance. And I got to thinking, why would people think you can't use this as a fighting stance? And it occurred to me it's because many people don't know how to use their Yiji Kim Young Ma to generate power in their techniques. They just stand there and it's all arm. So, been thinking about this, decided to do a video. So first, let's talk about good posture and structure in Wing Chun and how to avoid the dreaded Wing Chun slouch. I know you've all seen this, okay? It goes back to two major things. When people open their stance for their Wing Chun, there's this idea amongst a lot of lineages that you have to tilt your pelvis forward. And watch what happens to my body automatically. If I'm in a neutral position and I go to tilt my pelvis forward, I'm automatically leaning backwards and putting my weight on my heels. Okay? Now, if I do that and I lean backwards, put my weight on my heels, I just naturally have to hunch over to bring my balance forward, so I feel like I'm not going to fall over backwards. Now, if my arms are out and I try to focus on this idea of keeping my elbows close to the center line, I end up like this. And you've seen guys doing chi sao like this all the time. This is bad posture, bad structure. And it goes back to this whole idea of tilting the pelvis forward, leaning forward to compensate, and putting the elbows on the center. Just a slouch. We already have that in our society today, where most of the people spend a lot of time sitting at a desk, working at a computer, talking on the phone, writing. You're already hunched forward a big part of your day. Don't make it worse with your Wing Chun. What you want to do, when you open this stance, your pelvis should be nice and balanced, right? I'm not tilting forward. I don't have my butt out. I'm right in the middle. Nice and tall, nice and straight. We want to have our lower tantian, our upper tantian lined up on a straight line. We talk about having that central axis that's like it runs through the center of our body, from the top of our head into the ground, right? If I'm leaning back, leaning forward, I've broken that axis. It needs to be straight up and down for good structure, okay? So I want not a locked quad, but what we call a floating quad. The quad in general is the pelvic area. So it includes the hip joints, it includes the lumbosacral junction, the SI joints. This whole region is the quad, and the lower tantian is the center of the quad, and that's where we want our center of gravity to be, and that's the point we kind of move around as we're moving. It's the quad here. A floating quad means that I haven't locked it out. When I do this, I've tightened all the ligaments at the front of my hip. Y ligament of Bigelow is stretched. My hips are locked into place. I unlock things, and now I've got a nice floating quad. I can use my hips. I can sink much better. I can move better than if I've locked things out by doing this. Okay? Another issue is weight distribution. What I want to talk about here is optimal biomechanics. I'm not trying to run down any one lineage. Okay? People that have done a lot of training can make things work, no doubt about it. People can make some of these things I'm going to talk about work very well. Okay? But it doesn't mean they're optimal. So what I want to talk about is, from a biomechanical standpoint, how to do things optimally. Okay? What we want to, from an optimal biomechanical standpoint, I want to be able to straight up and down. I want to be able to sink my weight right over a central point. So my weight ends up being over the arch of my foot, not on my heels. We talk about it being at the K1 point, which is just the kidney 1 or bubbling spring point, which is kind of behind the ball of the foot, right in the center. But really, we're just talking about this region, the arch, is where you want your weight. You're not out here on the balls of your feet. You're not back here on your heels. Your weight's over your arch. So it's a nice, balanced position. I'm not leaning back here on my heels, right? I'm on the arch of my foot. This way, I can send and receive force in an optimal manner. If my weight is already back on my heels, when I go to receive force, I don't have a lot of place to go. I don't have a lot of absorbing capacity. If my weight is forward and I receive force, then my feet act like a shock absorber, and my weight goes back on my heels, and I sink, and I receive force. If I want to send force, I don't do it from my heels. I do it from the ball of my foot. Think about any other athletic activity. A sprinter on the blocks. Are they on their heels? No, they're up near the ball of the foot. A tennis player about to receive a serve. Is he back on his heels? No, he's up near the ball of his foot. A football player about to receive the ball and go. Is his weight on his heels? No, it's up near the bottom ball of the foot. So in any athletic performance, you put out force and forward momentum from the ball of your foot, not from your heel. Okay? So if we're going to pivot from that point, then we pivot as nice and smooth. Simple biomechanical fact. If you are going to pivot on your heels, your toes must swing. And if your toes are going to reduce enough weight off of the floor to swing, then that means over 50% of your weight is on your heels. If you pivot near the ball of your foot so your heels swing, then biomechanically speaking, that means that more than 50% of your weight is forward on the ball of your foot. So even when I'm pivoting, my weight is forward and I can put out force, and if something comes in while I'm pivoting, I have that capacity to absorb back onto my heels if necessary. So a nice smooth pivot, it doesn't mean my heels are up and flying, it just means that I'm keeping my weight over that point of my foot. Now another biomechanical factor is weight distribution. 50-50 weight distribution, or near to it, is the most balanced position. So it makes sense that it's going to be your most biomechanically optimal position, right? If I want to send power forward, I'm spinning with a 50-50 weight distribution, I'm staying balanced. If I'm shifting late to one leg as I punch, then my force has gone this way. It hasn't gone straight out, it's gone at an angle. And I've killed some of my momentum. It's just physics. So optimal structure is 50-50 weight distribution. The same thing when I'm stepping. If I'm going to step, I've got 50-50 weight distribution. I can go as easily forward as back, right? Rather than putting weight on my rear leg like this. Okay, people say, well, it unweights your front leg so you're not prone to a sweep. Well, I can be 50-50 and still lift my leg up pretty quick, right? So I'm not worried about a sweep. 50-50 is just biomechanically sound. Okay? So avoid the Wing Chun slouch. So what can you do about it? What happens, you can spend a lot of time in this position, and you'll see this in your coworkers, just watch around the office or the workplace, the pec muscles have tightened because you spend all your time out here. So you've got to counteract that by stretching the pec muscles. Easiest way to do that is find a doorway, a door jamb, where there's wall on both sides of the door, so that you can step through the door with your arms against the door jamb and stretch. You want to do it in 3 positions. Arms down at 45 degrees, arms straight out, arms up at 45 degrees. Step through, keep the head up, and stretch. Step through again, and stretch. And stretch. Stretch out those pec muscles to help the shoulders go back. When you go throughout your day, think of good posture, but don't think of keeping your shoulders back, because all that does is fire your upper traps and you're going to end up with neck pain and a headache. Think of rolling the elbows inward, just enough that it fires the rhomboids. It'll bring your shoulders back. You don't have to walk around like this all day like some goofus. All you got to do is think in terms of, instead of this, roll the elbows in a little bit and your posture will improve. And keep your chin back. All these things to help counter that Wing Chun slouch. So 50-50 weight distribution is the most biomechanically feasible. Having your upper body, lower body all in one line, and keeping your pelvis centered and not locked out. Let it float. Now if you want to test this, just think, you're standing in your Ijikam Ma, your weight's back on your heels, well now take a one-legged stance. There's no way you can stand this way with your weight on your heel. The ground reaction force when your body is perfectly straight is going to go through the middle of your foot, through your knee, through your hip, through your shoulder. In order for that ground reaction force to go through my heels, I have to lean backwards and compensate, right? Nice, balanced, straight, upright position, I am on the arch of my foot. If I go to stand on one leg, it's the same thing. If I tried to stand on one leg and keep my weight on my heels, I'd be going over backwards, right? When I'm standing on one leg, that ground reaction force is going right through the arch of my foot, okay? Again, that's just good biomechanics. Now let's talk about some power production using these ideas. Again, if you haven't locked out your pelvis, your hip is still floating, your hip can be engaged. I see too many people that don't use their body, their hips at all, it's all arm, or if they are, they're not using it to its full capacity. Because the idea here is, Yiji Kim Young Ma is a fighting stance because I can produce power from my stance. It's not just a matter of standing here and all arm. I can use power from my hip. So when I get in close to somebody, using my Yiji Kim Young Ma, I generate power, right? It's a fighting stance. So how do I do that? Again, this has to come up from the ground. I'm pushing off slightly with the ball of my foot, just like I would be if any other athletic activity, right? It comes up, directed by my knee, through my hip, and out. Boom. I'm using my hip. The elbow has to be down to stay coupled with the hip for the force to go straight. If my elbow is up, if I've hunched, then I no longer have that connection, right? You want them linked. Boom. So this is similar to what a boxer does when he uses his hips, right? But a boxer plants one leg and he is pivoting around one hip, right? Either this way or he'll plant this one and pivot this way. Very different, right? He's putting everything onto one hip, pivoting around that hip. And that's how a boxer generates power. The problem with this is, it's kind of committed, right? He recovers by pivoting back. But for that instance, when I've turned, it's very easy for my punch to be passed over, somebody to get behind me, take my flank. Same way if I've done this, it's very easy for this to get pushed across and off balance me. I'm talking about using hips, smaller amplitude, and so that I'm always centered. I'm never reaching. You're always using the hip for power, okay? Try this experiment. If you can use your hips, you should be able to put your hands on your dummy and rock your dummy without pulling your hands off the surface, right? And it's not really a push, it's an impulse. So here's what I'm talking about. I should be able to put hands on my dummy, stand in my Yiji Kim Young Ma, smack my dummy. And notice I'm not pulling my arms back, I'm not loading, pushing with my shoulders, trying to keep my elbows at the same distance, touching the dummy here, and all I do is use my hips, and I'm hitting the dummy with my hips. Right. I can do it with one hand. Right. I can do it to Bob. Same thing. If I'm here, touching Bob, I'm not going to lift my hands back. Alright? I'm here. I'm just using my hips. I'm going to hit Bob with my hips. Right? That's all it is. Call it short power, call it Fajing, call it inch power. I don't care. I'm not into those demos where you try to show a 1-inch punch. Because this should be part of every technique you use. This short power, this ability to use the hips. I put that little snap into something. And it can come out in subtle ways. The other days I was training one of my guys on the dummy, who's just kind of learning, and he was seeing me putting a lot of power into the dummy, and he was trying to do the same thing. He comes back to me the next day covered with bruises. I didn't have a single bruise. And it's not because of conditioning. I've banged my arms so much that I'm impervious to bruises. It's all in how you apply power to the dummy. He was using big motions and hitting the dummy hard. I was using a relaxed motion and then snapping into the dummy. So using this idea of the hip. So rather than just kind of pacing around the dummy, right? If I'm using my hips, I can put a lot more force into the dummy, but I'm not hitting it hard with my arms. And again, it's kind of subtle, but the proof was there. He had lots of bruises, I didn't. So let me show you some exercises we do to help develop this. We use these as a warm-up. And I've seen similar things that people done and called Qigong. I don't know, maybe it's Qigong, maybe it isn't. I just use it as a warm-up, as a way to feel these fascial connections and loosen them up and kind of put them into awareness. Because realize your whole body is connected by layers of fascia. Okay? The old mechanists used to think of the human body like a series of pulleys and levers. That's passé. You can't think that way anymore. The body is not a series of pulleys and levers. Look up biotensegrity. Okay? Buckminster Fuller came up with the idea of tensegrity, the geodesic dome. Stephen Levine applied it to biological structures and came up with the idea of biotensegrity. So look it up. I think Dr. Levine has a website. I've met him several times. I've talked to him, heard him lecture, play with his little biotensegrity toys. It's very cool. Okay? It's the idea that everything is connected. Everything's connected with the fascia. Now you can't think about it as a series of levers. Okay? Just look it up. Trust me. So, I do the wave. Okay? So first we wave from right leg, the left leg to right shoulder. Okay? And I'm just going to leave my arms relaxed. And you'll see my right arm moving more. Not because I'm moving it more, but because that's where I'm sending the force, right? I'm not trying to move it any more than my left. It's just a nice wave. And this is coming from the center of my foot, up my leg, through my hip and spine, and out my shoulder. Now if I make it go from the right foot to the left shoulder, now you'll see the difference in my arm movement. And again, I'm not trying to swing one arm any more than the other. That's just the direction the force is going. So if I do it from behind, right to left, now left to right. Okay? Then we can do it more in parallel, so right leg to right arm, right? And again, I'm not trying to swing one arm more than the other, it's just where the force is going. So left leg to left arm, or right leg to right arm. Okay, if I do that one from behind, right side, left side. Then the other way to do it is side to side, so I'm getting more of a rotary action. So now I'm trying to use both hips equally. Okay, and so you'll see I'm not changing my arms in any way. They just naturally are going to go side to side. Behind. While you're doing this as a warm-up, you'll feel your core. To really use your hips and your pelvis well, to use your quad, you got to have good core strength. So another exercise we like to do is with a pole. Okay? I like to call this shaking the dragon's tail. Sounds cool. I made that up myself. But you're standing in your Iji Kum Yung Ma. I'm holding my pole out at arm's length, and then I'm going to move the tip of my pole without moving my arms, or moving my arms as little as possible. And I do it again with my hips. Okay, I turn a different angle. From here, arms out. And again, that's just using my hips as the power generator to shake the pole. If this was waxwood or bamboo, it's not, it's teak. But if it was more flexible, the tip of that pole would be snapping all over the place. That's the goal. Okay? Do that for a while. That's a good workout. So, again, all this waving is exaggerated. It's a big motion. When you use it, the amplitude becomes smaller, but it's still there. So if I'm standing here, I can hit this with just my arms, or I can use my hips. There's a big difference when you know what you're doing. why Yi Ji Kim Yung Ma is a fighting stance. If I'm back on my heels, leaning back like this, I'm never going to be able to use my hips to hit that way. It's just a fact. Hope that all makes sense. Thank you.